Good morning, everybody. I'm glad you could join us this morning for what we're calling the PLC webinar series this year. And what that allows us to do is have conversations about any topic rather than just focusing on one. If you go to the EdTech Specialist website, you will see the information about past webinars that have been recorded and future. And we have a great selection coming up. And the ones that we did years ago on project-based learning and competency are still very relevant, and I invite you to look at those. And the PLC webinars we've had this year are great. January 4th, Ken K with Ed Leader 21 will be with us to talk about the portrait of a graduate, which is for a lot of communities is a way they kind of start developing the goals for the community and how that fits in with personalization and competency and that kind of a thing. So he is nationally known for this, and he will be with us January 4th. That one is going to be at 11 in the morning. You'll see the schedule again on the EdTech Specialist website. And the login information isn't on there, so we've been kind of doing this by invitation only. So if anyone on here, you got the login information right now because you're on the webinar. If you, for some reason, are just on the call but want the login information, contact me and I will provide that for you. So we pretty much have been keeping it to the Michigan CoOp and other people who have shown interest in being with us. And it's been a really nice way to kind of handle our webinars this year. So, I really am excited about all that we've got going on, including today. I'm very excited about this one. So, again, just to overview, if your microphone is off because you're worried about feedback or you just want some quiet, that's great. But don't hesitate to open it and ask questions. And if you would rather put a question into the chat, you can do that. And, really encourage this to be a conversation. I'm going to introduce kind of how the Michigan CoOp came about from my perspective, and then we're going to, the three guys will go through their perspectives as well. But one of the things I wanted to start with, because, putting this together, we've all been reminiscing and looking back and, kind of have different perspectives on a lot of this starting and stopping and up and down and all that kind of stuff. But what really hit me this morning is that that somebody's defined a part of your life when you can remember the moment you met them. At least that's the way I was looking at this morning, because I thought, I know exactly when I met each of these three guys. And it was just really, it's been an honor to work with them. I mean, it's just, the Michigan CoOp, when I started it, it was because I was writing seat time waivers. And as I did that, many of the superintendents were, proactively implementing programs that didn't require a kid to be in the seat. Some were virtual schools, and some of the status quo people were not happy. So, they would go to various meetings and not necessarily be well received. And so I thought, boy, it would be nice to get a few of them together. So I invited 6 superintendents only to come together and have a conversation with each other. And immediately, the friendships formed, the relationships started, and it was fantastic to see all of that elevated energy because they were now with people who, were like-minded. And these guys, and we look back, Jim, I think one day you told us that today's innovation is tomorrow's status quo, and it's almost like we accept all that right now. That said, though, these guys, that was not the case. There's a little bit of background noise. That was not the case with these guys. They were the innovators in the virtual school seat time waiver environment. And it not only takes a vision, it takes a lot of guts. And you really have to be courageous because there wasn't a lot of research and background to build on. A lot of the times, as the lady from the Iowa Department of Ed said to us one day, you build the plane while you're flying it. And that's a scary feeling sometimes. But, having come together, they really help support each other. And as I said, I think one of the nice things that we've seen is that it's really, the friendships and the relationships have grown. When I asked those first 6, they were non-contiguous. So they were not in a competitive schools of choice market. And then it began to grow. Teachers wanted to be there. Other administrators wish they could be with us. Virtual school directors. So it's grown to be a big group. And we meet twice a year officially and do other things in between. And I mean, it's just an amazing group of people who have a passion for kids. So, and that's what Lisa has put up on our slide that you're viewing. If you're online, there's a passion for putting kids first. That has always been their first line of information they provide. You know, people have been wowed by them because they don't ask for money first. Yes, they need money to innovate, there's no doubt, but they're always talking about programs and opportunities for kids. So proudly, I want to, you know, introduce our three speakers. I did invite some of the other original people who are no longer even in Michigan, and I'm not sure they're going to be able to be on or not. If they are, I've asked them to jump in and let us know they're there so that we can have a little back and forth with them as well. And then others, current Michigan CoOp superintendents are with us also, which is so fun. We now have 15 districts, and it's just a great group of people. So what I will do is we'll start with you, Mike, and then we'll go to Jim, and then we'll go to Daryl. So I'll just kind of let you, Mike, take over, and then you can pass the baton to Jim and Daryl, and then we'll open it up. So thank you.
Like any journey, when it started, I didn't know it was actually starting. I'll just use a couple examples. When I took over the last district I was in, one of the first days I was there, the elementary principal was gone to an elementary principal's meeting, and I got a call saying that there's a kid that's out of control and he's down in the principal's office and we're afraid he's going to bust out windows and things. You better get down here. So I went down, and sure enough, this kid was just wildly angry. So I talked to him. I said, here's what I want you to do. I had him do several passive stretching exercises that were designed to kind of calm him down. And I said, now, do you know why I just had you do those things? He said, I have no idea. I said, because you were so angry, you were not ready to talk to me. I want to hear what you have to say. Why were you so angry? And he said, I was in my classroom and I was reading, and he said, everything moves so slowly in the classroom and it just drives me nuts. And I was in a chapter ahead of where we're supposed to be reading, and the teacher got angry at me because I wasn't on the same page as everybody else. So I got sent down to the office. He said, I'm tired of having to wait for everybody else because I already know all this stuff and I have to do it because that's what everybody else is doing. So that was student number one. Then the next day, I thought, well, let me sit in on an IEP. I sat in on an IEP because I knew it was controversial. The parents didn't like the math teachers. The math teacher deals with kids who don't know math. It totally washes them out. And they said, well, this kid qualifies for special education in math. So, here's the special education teacher. He will be in the morning for English and social studies, in the afternoon for math and science. I said, wait a minute. He's having trouble in math. Why are you putting him in? Well, because he's special ed. And I realized that the teachers were only willing to teach to a narrow band of abilities where everybody moved at the same time and at the same pace. And I thought, this has to change because they're trying to fit all the students into a narrow band of conformity so that it makes it easy to manage them. When what we should be doing is we should be taking the kids and trying to fit the programs to them. And that's why I came up with the idea that we should fit school to the child and not the child to the school. And not long after that, a counselor came to me and said, well, I've got this student who wants to transfer out of our district because we don't offer these courses and the neighboring district does. And I said, well, why would the student have to transfer out? can't we put the student in some online courses? Oh, we don't do online courses. Well, why not? Well, we don't have any computers. And so the whole idea that the district needed to change in order to meet the needs of the students was really the driving force behind the changes that we started putting into place. And I thought, well, these are all neat ideas. Why don't I share them at the ISD superintendent's meeting? Well, sharing them at the ISD superintendent's meeting did not go over well because people did not like the fact that I was not following the traditional legacy system, and things went downhill from there. So, Jim, you're up next.
Well, I'm probably not as pure as Mike or some of the other ones. My whole motivation, being a superintendent that always took over troubled districts, and when you have troubled districts, usually there's financial difficulties associated with that, was finding an avenue to create a revenue stream in order to better the educations of all the kids in the district that I served. And in my situation, in every district that I took over, I believe the way that you did that was to separate yourself from your competition. And so I wasn't really all that concerned about collaboration. Quite to the contrary, it wasn't my fault that the state determined that we were going to be a school of choice district and that you could bleed kids if you weren't perceived as one of the better districts. And those were always the districts that I took over. They had some kind of gaps as compared to the districts that were perceived the best in the RESA or ISD that I served. So my concern with being innovative was, what can I innovate? What can I put in place that separates me from the other districts and starts a mindset out there that the district, in my last district would have been Berrien Springs, the district that I had was a special place, and I needed a way to control the news cycle in our area. So I was always looking for innovative ways to implement a program that other people either weren't willing to take the risk to implement, or they weren't going to implement because they would only implement things that were based on best practice, which, by the way, is a wonderful thing to say, that you're always going to have best practice programs and you're implementing best practice programs, but it really doesn't speak to implementing innovative programs. So, we got big into that. Marcia's group came along, and I had the wonderful opportunity to listen to people that were always smarter than me, have these wonderful ideas. And I'm going to cut this short, but the issue isn't having these discussions that we're having right now. The issue is for them to motivate so that you can get to implementation. If it's no more than just an exchange of ideas, that's wonderful. But the truth of the matter is you have to get to implementation. So, we were able to get to implementation. We were able to separate ourselves from our competition, and because of that, we were able to change the last district I was in from a district that was on a cycle of just getting by, cycle of good enough, a cycle of blaming the state for all of its woes, to a position where they could control their own destinies. That's my piece.
Thanks, Jim. Daryl, you ready to hop in?
Sounds like you're up, Daryl.
Okay. I was thinking back when Marcia asked to do the webinar about how CLK got involved with the co-op, and it actually really started back in 2009, 2010, as superintendent of the district. With the educators, the teachers in the district, we're looking at changing the way we delivered instruction, to our students. Staff members were talking about the flipped classroom, blended learning programs, and that conversation was within the district. But there wasn't a lot of, in the state of Michigan, there wasn't a lot of districts at that time looking at the technology that was needed for changing those delivery methods. But we did start in the fall of 2011. We did start our one-to-one program in grades 4 through 12, and that a lot of it came down to not only changing the delivery instruction change, but also I noticed our students when they come into our building that I used to call it way back in 2009, our kids seemed to power down because electronics and smartphones were a big part of their lives even at that time. And I just noticed I was in the halls a lot and our kids just seemed to power down, and I wanted to deliver or have something for our customers, which I always called our students our customers. We needed an environment that was conducive to them. So again, that was another reasoning to look at the one-to-one way back in 2010. But again, there wasn't a lot of, I had to go to Wisconsin to a few districts in Wisconsin, so there wasn't much in Michigan going on at that time. So I was really searching out in Michigan other districts or superintendents that I could converse with or talk about this new path that we were going down. And then another thing that really happened to me that really got me looking towards, reaching out to their colleagues state was a family that came to me and said, you know what, we really like your school district, but your calendar is not conducive to our family, and we really would like to stay in school. But what happens is that all summer long they do a charter fishing charter throughout Lake Superior, and their whole family works all summer. And when the charter is over the fall, that's when they have time off, and that's when they would like to take their kids to go on their kids for a learning experience and not be held back by our calendar. So again, it was all accommodating our customers, and I kept thinking, okay, how can I accommodate these people? And that's when the virtual thought process is coming along. So that's when I was approaching then MDE Superintendent Mike Flanagan to get because at that time there were 6-12 seat time waivers, but there was not a K-5 seat time waiver available for districts. And I was working very hard with Superintendent Flanagan trying to get a K-5 seat time waiver, because these family had not only elementary kids, they had middle school and high school kids, so they had a wide variety of children. And it was getting frustrating for me because I couldn't accommodate this family and also other families that might like this form of learning style. So again, I needed to search out for individuals or groups, and I was looking, online and through different forums. And that's when I started reading about the Consensus for Change think tank and looking at that, which then led me to the Michigan CoOp. And then that's when I was in contact with Marcia, which I would believe was in the summer of 2012. And then I attended my first CoOp meeting that fall in 2012. And I do have to say that first meeting for me, that it was the superintendent CoOp meeting, that first meeting was career changing for me. Professionally, it gave me a new opportunity to sit down and have a conversation about kids and education with which I thought were with other forward-thinking superintendents. Even when Marcia said, well, what kind of format should we have for the webinar? And all three of us said, well, let's just do like we just have a conversation, and then let's just see where it all takes us. So again, those conversations basically had no boundaries. We're all thinking, and our thoughts were out there. The only boundaries that we would talk about during those early conversations were the rules and regulations that were in place that constricted our thoughts and what we could do about those thoughts. And one thing that we talked a lot about, wouldn't it be nice to have the right to innovate without any of these barriers that are in place? And you fast forward now 6 years, and we have House Bill 6314 and 6315, which is kind of nice to see. And I think without the work of the CoOp and these bills would not be sitting at the Senate today. So that's kind of my spiel of how the CLK schools got involved with the CoOp.
Like King said,
Go ahead, Mike.
like Jim said, getting to implementation is the real challenge. And educators love to talk, but it's what we actually do that counts. And I think one of the big values of these sessions were that these group of superintendents would sit down, because we're all facing the same types of barriers, and talk with each other. We weren't all doing the same things or doing them in the same way, but what we had in common was we would talk about what we were doing to help implement our ideas, and that would spark new ideas in our own districts about how to go about bringing the vision into reality.
Daryl brought up the Consensus for Change think tank, and that was another a place where the Michigan CoOp superintendents gathered as well. And one of the things that Mike, you always made sure that we never adjourned unless we had next steps in place, and it wasn't just a time to come together and vision together. Again, it was, we decided we weren't just the Consensus for Change think tank, we were the Consensus for Change do tank. And it's thanks to all of you guys, that we saw a lot of those implementations, take place. Just before we kind of open it back up again, I just wanted to see if any of the other Michigan CoOp superintendents, current or past, have joined the call this morning. Okay. So if any of you would like to interact, please feel free. You can do so just by using your microphone on your computer, or if you're on the phone, you can just jump in. If we get a lot of people at the same time, we'll work it out. So now it's just kind of a time for the three guys to talk with each other, if that is what you would like to do, because, again, like Daryl said, that's what they do. They get together, and then it just, the ideas explode. It gets very passionate and energetic, but they really are anxious to hear what you want to say or ask them.
I think back
Marcia, go ahead. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah.
Or Daryl.
One thing that I remember, Marcia, those are first meetings, and that's why I'd come to those meetings so energized, and I'd go back into my own district and look for opportunities to try and implement some of the stuff that, the practices that we discussed. But I always remember very clearly Marcia would have some kind of agenda for us, but it was never, ever followed. we were off in so many directions, and it was so nice as a superintendent just to sit down and have the conversation and share ideas on kids. And like Marcia said earlier, it was all focused on the kids. We always put the adults behind. They were secondary. It was what's best for kids, and that was the center of our conversation. And that was one thing that before the co-op and those meetings with like Jim and Mike and the others, is that you'd go to the ISD roundtable meetings or our region meetings, and there's just not that opportunity to sit and honestly and openly have a good discussion about different ways of doing things, because it just seemed like everybody was just in that pattern of going along, and the only time that the districts would change is when it was forced upon them by either the legislature or MDE. It's just again, innovation and change are two different things, but it was just nice to sit down with forward-thinking superintendents and just let ideas flow and just have an open and honest discussion. And everybody would talk, and there was no format. It was just a conversation. And I remember very clearly making that 7-hour drive, 8-hour drive north, and it seemed like a very short drive because I couldn't wait to get back to to my district to talk about things with the board and the administration and our staff and even our community. So again, the benefits of just having a group of people to be able to have a discussion is very rewarding, and was, for me, again, like I said, it was career changing.
One of the things, Marcia, go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Jim.
Well, just one of the things that I thought was really important about the group, and I think everybody could benefit from even today, is that too often all of the discussions that we have are with other educators. And that in itself will give you a closed set of thinking. And so when Marcia set up the group, we had people like Dave Stites from Apple on there, who was, I mean, Apple and innovation. You can't say Apple without thinking of innovation. He opened my mind in many, many ways. And there were other non-educators who had concern about education, who just put the can open and opened up my mind in ways that if I was just with educators, I probably wouldn't have had a chance to change my thinking. So when you're setting up these groups to consider change and innovation, I really think if there's a possibility to bring those kind of people into into the groups, and that they have equal voice like everybody had in the old days, that it can take you down avenues you never even thought you'd go. I mean, I used to walk away from those meetings just excited because there were thoughts that I never had even had a chance to give, consideration to, that made such a difference in the way I approached educating kids. But it wasn't because I necessarily learned from educators. It was things that I was hearing from other people that weren't bound by the thought process that we had as educators.
I'm often asked, well, why can't you just identify the barriers to innovation and we can work on what those are? The nature of innovation is you don't know what the next innovation is coming down the road. And that's what we have to be prepared for is, there was a time when virtual school was a huge innovation and there was a great deal of resistance to it. Now it's pretty commonly accepted. And then early college, we fought, remember, Jim, we fought for years to get that in, and that was a real struggle. Now early college is pretty well accepted, and then partnerships are currently a struggle. But we never know what the next round of innovation is going to be. All we know is that we don't know that it's going to be something new. And each time we get to a certain step, we know that there's going to be another step. And that's just the nature of change. And so trying to prepare for the coming change, I don't know how you can do it other than having a mindset that you know that what we're preparing students for is not the world that we're living in now. We're preparing students for something that looks far different. And I think education misses the point when they don't look around and see what's happening to commerce and industry and traditional, like the big three automakers, giving up on internal combustion engines and going to self-driving electric cars. When you take a look at store chains like Sears and Toys R Us and going bankrupt, the world is changing, and we need to take a look at why the world is changing. And I think the lessons that are out there are largely being ignored by education, and somehow we have to keep those things alive. And the conversations we would have when we would get the Michigan CoOp superintendents together would recognize the fact that we're living in a period of transitional change to a new era. And I think that was one of the enlivening parts of those meetings.
It's free flowing. I just think back to my district mentality. I really believed, and I still believe, that the healthiest districts are districts that operate under a condition of organized chaos, that they never let their districts settle into the status quo. That doesn't mean that you don't have initiatives that you're going to spend years on and that kind of thing, but you never settle into the status quo because, the old mindset that you're either moving forward or slipping backwards, I really believe that's true. And so part of what the Innovation Council, and not Innovation Council, Marcia's group allowed us to do is always look forward instead of spending all of our time defending what already happened. And if I were a young superintendent, I would sure consider the fact that you have to find ways to separate yourself continually. It's not a one-time shot, and you're always going to be known for one thing. Your community really won't care about that as much as getting the feeling that you're on the cutting edge of all the things that are out there. You're not following people, you're leading people. And you need a group of people to get together to foster that kind of mentality. And we had that with that first group, Marcia.
You know, one thing I always remember
Go ahead, Joe.
with that, following up with Jim, I'll never forget this when Jim spoke. And like he said a little bit earlier, is that we had a lot of discussions and ideas were flowing. Well, I'll never forget the statement, and probably the reason that some of the implementations that we put forth in Calumet was really because of Jim, because I never forgot it when he said, yeah, you can converse all you want, you can throw ideas all you want, but it's really the doers or the implementers. Those are the people, you know, there's going to be risks, and you got to take those risks, but you got to be an implementer. And yeah, we'd have all these great ideas, but you got to go back and implement them, and you got to take that risk to do that. And that's really the reason that we did go into the virtual programs, the early college programs, and a lot of different stuff. Was mainly because that comment from Jim. And I don't think if Jim, you know, the way he said it, it stuck in my mind that no, you got to be an implementer. You got to get it. You got to be a doer, and you just do it. It's going to take some risks, but you just do it. You implement it if it's good for kids.
You know, the other thing that I have witnessed with you guys is that you have come up against some barriers and some you know, situations that a lot of people then would say, I'm done. But because of your putting kids first, you guys just plow right through it and keep going. And I mean, you had courage to do it the first time, but then when you keep going, that takes guts. So, you know, and you really have set the stage for a lot of other people. I look at the current group of Michigan CoOp superintendents, and they've learned a lot from all of you because you guys have really set the stage. And I think we're all kind of waiting. What's the next big, you know, step everybody's going to take? I know there's a lot of look at competency, and again, that takes courage to embark on that. And I think as we gather, I think people are feeling that momentum. They're seeing the districts who are engaging in that conversation, and you know, they feel like things are going well. Let's our district look at it as well. So I really would love to have some comments or questions from those of you who are on the call and webinar. So if any of you would like to jump in. Because I look at some of the people who are on here, you know, you've been with us for a long, long time. You know, I see Bill Bergen that you're on, and I think back to, you know, Jim and I talk about it. I don't get to see you as often, but those early days of when you came up to Traverse City and, you know, kind of looking at what can we do with this seat time waiver? And I wasn't with you guys driving home, but I understand it's pretty energetic conversation.
Marcia, this is Dave Eichberg. A question I have for our guest speakers would be, a lot of us talk about innovation, but I think there's different perspectives and different definitions of innovation. And since these are some of the original innovators in the co-op, I'd like to hear from each of them how they define innovation.
Well, I'll start out. First of all, I think there's a misunderstanding of what innovation is, and a lot of people attach the concept of change to innovation. So when I'm thinking of innovation, I'm thinking about creation of thought and practice that nobody else is doing. You know, I can remember interviewing years ago in different districts, and they would ask if I was an innovator or on the cutting edge, and you know, and I would always say to them, well, if you're attaching anything that I would come to this district and do to best practice, then I'm not an innovator. I can't be an innovator. I can be a change agent. And so I think sometimes we get bogged down looking at best practice and change that we'll have to implement into our district, which can be very difficult. And we attach that to innovation. But innovation is the only way. Innovation is the only way you're ever going to separate yourself from your competition of other local districts, if they can go on the shelf and buy what you're doing. So to me, innovation truly is just that, the moments where you can create something that nobody else is doing, and eventually it will become your status quo and other people can hook up to it. But so that's my big thing. Don't think that change is innovation. They're not necessarily the same.
To me, there are basic underlying assumptions in education, many of which are unexamined. And if you challenge those basic underlying assumptions, then you're taking a look at innovation. You know, one of our underlying assumptions is that everything is time-based. You start students at a certain age, you move them through the system at a certain age, you give them exposure to the curriculum at a certain time, and move them on. That you have a body of knowledge that everyone is supposed to access, and the what of learning is more important than teaching them how to learn. That's a basic assumption. The locus of control in schools is with the adults and the curriculum, which you impose upon students rather than students being the locus of control. Those types of things, those beliefs about education, to me, are core. And when you challenge those, that's innovation.
Yeah, and I kind of follow the sentiments of Jim and Mike, but I look at something that's new or something that is different. One thing I look at way early on, quite a while ago, we started our early college, and if you know the situation at Calumet schools, we're the most northern K-12 school, very remote school, and looking way back early on when we started our early college, we didn't have the means of other places where the community college is nearby or higher education is nearby, but the necessity of an early college program in Calumet, it had to happen, so we had to do something different, and I had to get special permission from MDE in order to follow through with our kind of early college program, which was totally different. And again, they accepted my proposals because of our remoteness and where we were situated. That's where we had a different early college. So again, it's something different that you introduced that is good for kids.
One of the other pieces to the group is the trust that they've built up with each other through those relationships. And they trust each other enough to disagree. And I think some of the conversations that we've had over the years in our conferences or otherwise, not everyone agrees on everything. I mean, certainly one of the things that we've all noticed is that, and you guys have referenced that, it isn't like everybody's doing the same thing. You have a virtual school, but they look different. You may all have early college, but because of, just like Daryl's saying, they look different because of the uniqueness of your surroundings. So I think that, these are the things that when you trust somebody enough to argue with them, friendly arguments, that kind of thing. And the other is that, certainly there's competition. And I mean that in a very healthy way. They challenge each other. They really look to each other for support. And that just comes through time and building relationships and building that trust they have with each other. They share ideas with each other that they wouldn't share with other people because they they understand that, you know, this is, in order to build upon their own program, it's good to have others doing similar kinds of things where they can get new ideas, learn about the best practices, learn about the things that didn't work. Certainly one of the things we all learned from Dave Seitz was to fail forward. I mean, just do it, get it over with, and then learn from it and go on. So you guys have lived by all of that.
Yeah, no question, Marcia, Daryl, again, the respect that I have, like, for Jim and Mike, we're all three of us are on the Innovation Council, and one thing I always look forward to is getting back to Lansing and seeing those two gentlemen, because just the support that they gave me too, you know, where there was about education questions, lawmakers or union staff members. Again, they were open and honest with me, and the support of that was just tremendous for all of us. And, you know, we could talk openly and honestly, and I think that's healthy in superintendent profession, when you have some people like that you can be open and honest about. Because I even told current superintendent Chris Davidson, I said, you know, it's a lonely position. A lot of times you're in your district, you got some situations, say with your Board of Education or administrative staff or something like that. It's lonely. You don't have a lot of people to go to, especially, you know, surrounding your own district. So it was always nice and very healthy for me to have the co-op and guys like Jim and Mike, where you could rely on their expertise and the support that you got from the whole co-op group. I think it's very important for the superintendents in the co-op to have that support and just be able to lean on the other members of the co-op.
As I mentioned a little bit earlier, you know, we expanded from just being the superintendents because, you know, I think part of it was because sometimes the superintendent couldn't attend and they asked someone else to represent them. And through that, they wanted them to come back, and others heard, and, you know, kind of grew from there. But if anyone who's on this call or webinar has any comments about that, I know that the Michigan CoOp is now a group of districts where anyone in the district can be with us, and many are. Our January conference is busting at the seams, and we all know there's going to be a storm. We all know that, you know, we're going to have an interesting drive to be together, but we all do it because it's, you know, it's so worthwhile. But I didn't know if anyone else on the call who's in the Michigan CoOp and maybe isn't a superintendent had anything they'd like to share.
Their phones are all on mute.
Well, certainly, and it's fine. I just didn't know if anyone had a story, or, you know, I think about some of the experiences that we've had. You know, one of the formats for the Consensus for Change think tank in the Michigan CoOp, one of the kind of the way we set things up is to get together midday on day one, have the afternoon together with agenda. As Daryl said, that changes all the time. Lisa and I laugh when we're putting one together because we think, oh, it's going to change, but we'll still put one together. And then, you know, we do the same thing kind of the next day, but in between, we all gather for dinner, socialize, and just enjoy each other as you know, individuals. And it is so much fun. This group has so many great experiences that they've shared with each other. And of course, a lot of that conversation over dinner is still about our kids and, you know, different initiatives that people are working on. But we also get to just personally get to know people. It's just been an honor to be a part of this group.
Well, Marcia, we're getting towards the end of this, but one thought that comes to my mind that I really believed in is too often we're so busy and not just superintendents, everybody in all their roles in schools. You're so busy doing the day-to-day that you don't have any think time. And I think that is a huge mistake. If you don't take care of yourself and you don't invest in yourself so that you can think and contemplate and be around other people to steal good ideas, and maybe they can steal a few from you, you're doing your situation, your district, a disservice, because the truth of the matter is I can remember coming back just absolutely fired up after 2 or 3 days or a day of, considering different ideas. And what that allowed me to do was become the visionary and a person that could fire the district up. So, you got to take care of yourself if you're going to take care of your district, or you're going to be able to take care of your department or your area of responsibility. And getting the job done is not about doing the day-to-day kind of stuff only. It's also taking the time to contemplate what's next. Because, like I said earlier, the minute you become in the status quo, you absolutely are slipping backwards. So if you go to work every day and you're doing the same things over and over and over again, you quite frankly are doing yourself and your district a disservice. So you got to invest in yourself. And one of the ways that you can invest in yourself is get around like-thinking people who are not satisfied with the way things are.
I've often wondered how we could give that same opportunity to students to have that period of meeting together with like-minded people and then reflecting without social media around.
Yeah.
I'll open it up again to people who might want to make a comment. You can also do it in the chat area if you have a question you want to share. Screen that you're looking at shows the website, and I invite you all to go there, whether you're in the Michigan CoOp or, we are recording this, so there'll be people viewing this who are just learning about the Michigan CoOp. So you can see the website, you can see my contact information. You're very, very welcome to reach out to me. You can see my email is miles@edtechspecialist.com. I'd love to hear from you. The MiCoOp conference that we went to in October down in Nashville, the Michigan CoOp put on 2 presentations, and that was amazing. We did 2 proposals, both were accepted. One of them was strictly about the Michigan CoOp and kind of how it formulated. And one of the questions that was asked was, do we have bylaws? And I think that question kind of made all of us smile, because this is a very committed group. It isn't about having any formal structure. It's just about being committed to kids. That's the one thing that, exists in every one of these districts. So, if anyone wants any information, we'd love to share. We do have, like at that Nashville MiCoOp conference session, there were people from other states. And I have been asked by a few people in other states, how they could start one. And it would be interesting to see because this just grew organically. This was not something that, like Mike said in the beginning, we had no idea where this was going. We didn't know it was going anywhere. We just knew that people were getting together. And 10 years later, we're still doing that. So, it's very organic. It's very meaningful. And I know we've all learned a lot. Through the ups and downs, we've all learned a lot. And I think the most important thing we've learned is how to build, the real quality through the relationships we have together.
I also think, one of the benefits of the co-op is you have a bigger voice in the state, the legislature, MDE, than you do as a standalone district. A prime example again was I was working very, very hard to get that K-5 tea time waiver with Mike Flanagan, and Mike just basically said, no, I can't give it to you, because if I give it to you, I open Pandora's box, and now I got to give it to all the other districts. where lo and behold, the co-op had a K-5 time waiver. And so again, you have a bigger voice when you're with the co-op. Legislative effect in the educational communities for the co-op members and the co-op. So you know, that's a huge benefit. You have a voice, and you know, with Mike with his slate of expertise, having that voice at the table. He was just at the Senate, and I was watching the Senate Education Committee on TV there, and MD at the table, MASA, but also the co-op was at the table too, and at that committee meeting. So again, being a member of the co-op gives you a bigger voice to make things better for kids and make things change that are that are good for districts.
Marcia, this is Dave Eichberg. I just wanted to piggyback on your comment. We all are probably likely engaged in the best practice instructionally of teaching our students the value of having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And it's always occurred to me that we're pretty good at telling others about the value of that, and we're not always adept at making that part of our own practice. Being a member of the co-op not only encourages growth mindset, but it gives you that opportunity to set aside some time to just engage in having a growth mindset and experiencing that for ourselves.
Yes, I love hearing these things. It just makes me smile. Made a big difference throughout your districts, for yourselves, for me, for the state. It's a group to be proud to be a part of. Kids first. Thank you all for being on this webinar this morning. We will be posting it on the EdTech Specialist website. And then those of you in the Michigan CoOp, you can also go there. Do it there. I would love to hear from those of you, or especially those of you who might be listening to the recording. If you have any questions, please do reach out. Thank you all. This has been fabulous. Thank you. Mickey, you can stop the recording, and thank you all.